It's just gone 1500 GMT, and UK and EU leaders have finalised a new deal for Northern Ireland's post-Brexit trading arrangements. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has been meeting Prime Minister of the UK, Rishi Sunak, to discuss the details of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, disputes over the deal have prevented a government from forming in Northern Ireland. We've got correspondents covering both sides of this story. We have Rory Challens in Northern Ireland, in Belfast. But first, let's go over to Jonah Hull in Westminster. So, Jonah, finally, a deal has been struck. What do we know about the details in it?
Well, it's extraordinary, isn't it, to still be here talking about Brexit, talking about striking Brexit deals when Brexit was supposed to have been done quite some time ago. The reality is it was never done, and it was never going to be done until this issue of Northern Ireland was resolved. The internal contradiction in the entire process, whereby the UK leaves the EU, necessitating a new trade border between the two. That border can't run across the island of Ireland because of the Good Friday Peace Agreement, and so Boris Johnson in 2020 signs a deal putting that trade border in the Irish Sea. Rejected eventually, of course, by the Democratic Unionists, who saw it as undermining Northern Ireland's place in the Union of the United Kingdom and them boycotting power sharing as a result. And so the need for the UK to negotiate for weeks and weeks and weeks now for concessions from the EU, which they appear now to have got. They haven't scrapped the protocol. This is an update to the Northern Ireland Protocol, new provisions that will run alongside it that will ease the passage of trade. Let me say, we haven't seen the text of the deal yet, but leaks indicate that it will ease the passage of trade from the United Kingdom mainland into Northern Ireland for goods not destined to go any further than that. That, it is hoped, will lessen or minimise any potential role for the European Court of Justice. That was a big problem for the parties in being final arbiter to any disputes. And Northern Ireland, it is believed, will be given the final say in any new rules that are developed over time within the EU's single market for goods that would eventually apply to them, the so-called democratic deficit that the Democratic Unionists in Northern Ireland were so worried about. That seems to be the shape and function of these new provisions to the deal. The big question is for Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, who has really stuck his neck out here. It's a big gamble for him, a huge political moment in his premiership, is whether that deal is acceptable to the Democratic Unionists, whether they feel that it solves their democratic deficit, that it puts them back in essential alignment with the rest of the United Kingdom, and whether he can square it with his own MPs on the right of his party, who have already voiced concern that any deal that continues to exert EU influence on the affairs of Northern Ireland and therefore the UK could yet be struck down.
Well, that's going to be interesting in the coming hours, isn't it? Because Rishi Sunak will be addressing Parliament in a few hours after he gives a press conference with Ursula von der Leyen, which we will bring to our viewers live when that happens, we believe, in the next hour or so. After that, he will be where you are in Westminster, talking about this deal, taking it to Parliament. Will there be a parliamentary vote on it?
We haven't heard any final conclusion on that. There certainly is pressure on Number 10 Downing Street to offer a vote. Initially, there was reluctance by Rishi Sunak's team for quite obvious reasons, because there was concern about a backlash amongst his own MPs. He didn't want it to go to a vote because that might only serve to highlight new deep divisions within his party. He won't lose a vote because the Labour Party has already said they would support a deal if a deal is reached, but he would want to avoid the optics of division in the party. So the question is, does the DUP accept this deal? If they do, MPs in his party are likely to fall into line. We all await, they await, the legal text of the deal so that that can be very carefully scrutinised. It does now sound likely that Downing Street will, in fact, grant a vote, as I say, that they will win, but they will hope not to have to win it by exposing new divisions in the party.
OK, Jonah Holt for the moment. Thanks very much. We will come back to you as we get more details about the text of this deal and, of course, as we hear from the UK Prime Minister in the coming hours. Let's go over now to Northern Ireland and speak to Rory Challens. He's live for us in Belfast. As we heard Jonah saying there, Rory, key to this deal is whether or not the DUP, Northern Ireland's Unionists, whether they will accept it. They're going to be examining it very closely, aren't they? What are they most concerned about?
They are going to be going through it line by line. They say they have the lawyers ready and they will be poring over every aspect of this deal. They do not want to let anything slip through. They don't want to make any mistakes that could come back and bite them. So it could take some time for the DUP to come to a settled position on what this deal is and whether they can give it their green lights. They, of course, hate the Northern Ireland Protocol. It is the reason why this building behind me has not seen really any political activity for months, because the DUP pulled out of the power sharing agreement, part of the Good Friday peace deal that ended the Northern Ireland troubles many years ago. That political paralysis has been ongoing for months now, since the DUP, in protest of the Northern Ireland Protocol, pulled out and said we're not doing any business until that protocol is amended or sorted. So what they want to see essentially is the role of Europe and the European Union taken out as much as possible from Northern Ireland's affairs. They talk about this democratic deficit. We heard Jonah mentioning it there, whereby they feel Europe has too much of a say in Northern Ireland's rules and laws. They want to also make sure that Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom is indivisible, that there are no special terms really. It hasn't weakened that bond that they cherish so much between Northern Ireland and the UK mainland. And also, if they can get rid of as much oversight from the European Court of Justice as they can, then that will be a win for the DUP as well. So yeah, they're going to be going through it. They're not going to be coming back to Stormont, they say. They're not going to be resurrecting power sharing here until they're happy with the deal.
So that's what the politicians want, Rory. What about the people of Northern Ireland?
Well, that is a good question, because the issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol is much more important to the politicians than it seems to be to the population at large here. I've been here for a few weeks on the trot and speaking to businesses, speaking to people, asking them what they think. And by and large, businesses are quite happy with the protocol. Actually, if you're in manufacturing, it gives you a good basis for doing business, because you can trade with the Republic of Ireland, with the EU, and you can trade with the UK mainland. It gives you actually an advantage. There are issues with it if you're importing goods and things like that. So I spoke to people running fruit and vegetable businesses who say, yes, they have phytosanitary certificates and things like that, all the kind of boring bureaucracy. That's been increased, but they've found ways around it. So if you ask people, yes, most, I think a slim majority say that they think that the protocol is actually working. What they want most of all is for this place to be back up and running, because it's the provision of services, it's health, it's education. Those are foremost in the minds of most people in Northern Ireland, not necessarily the protocol. But of course, to get this place up and running, you have to make the DUP satisfied, and that is the big question. Are they going to be? We're going to have to wait and see.
Absolutely, and we will indeed. Rory Challens bring us the latest there from Belfast. Thanks very much for the moment.